Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump.
When people talk about the Trump administration, a few names always come up first. Donald Trump himself, of course. Maybe Elon Musk, thanks to his headline-grabbing involvement with the Department of Energy, or Doge, depending on who you ask. But curiously, there's one name that barely makes the rounds: Vice President J.D. Vance. Despite holding one of the most powerful positions in the country, Vance has managed to remain almost invisible. And that silence? It's starting to look less like strategy and more like exile. Unlike past vice presidents who commanded press briefings and drove policy debates, J.D. operates in the background, rarely stepping into the limelight unless controversy drags him there. And lately, controversy has been more of a curse than a tool. From his provocative views on family values to his divisive takes on foreign policy, Vance has never shied away from stirring the pot, but it hasn't exactly earned him a seat at the table. Insiders describe a growing distance between Vance and Trump. The kind of cold shoulder you don't often see between a president and his running mate. And now, whispers of humiliation, political isolation, and even early retirement are circling. Is it burnout, or has Vance realized he was never really in Trump's inner circle to begin with? What makes this story more compelling isn't just who J.D. Vance is, but how far he's fallen from where he thought he was heading. He wasn't supposed to be a background character. But in the Trump political machine, even the vice president can find himself muted, mocked, and possibly replaced. And that's where it gets interesting, because J.D.'s transformation from rebel to right-hand man wasn't just unexpected, it was controversial. Before J.D. Vance became Donald Trump's vice president, he was one of Trump's loudest critics. He once branded Trump as cultural heroin for the Republican base, a man he claimed was feeding the country a dangerous delusion. But political ambition has a strange way of rewriting convictions. Not only did Vance change course, he went full throttle into Trumpism, becoming one of the most outspoken voices in the far-right movement. The transformation was so dramatic, some called it betrayal. Others? Just survival. His book Hillbilly Elegy painted him as a working-class intellectual with deep Midwestern roots, a man who understood the struggles of forgotten America. But once in the political spotlight, he pivoted hard. And what came next was anything but subtle. In interviews and speeches, Vance began pushing ideas that sounded more like shock jock radio than presidential material. He claimed America was being run by childless cat ladies, sparking outrage from both political opponents and everyday people. He doubled down, naming Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, and AOC as examples of leaders supposedly disconnected from the future because they lacked biological children. According to Vance, having kids isn't just a personal choice, it's a moral and patriotic duty. And he didn't stop there. Teachers, activists, even union leaders like Randy Weingarten weren't spared from his tirades. If you didn't fit into his rigid mold of what family and leadership should look like, you were a threat to America's future. His defenders saw bold truth-telling. His critics saw cruelty wrapped in populism. Despite the backlash, Vance didn't back off. But while he made noise in public, something else was brewing behind closed doors, a growing sense that Trump and his allies weren't taking him seriously. Because when the spotlight finally turned to J.D., it wasn't to elevate him, it was to sideline him. And that became painfully clear inside the White House. For a vice president, proximity to the president is everything. It's not just about policy influence, it's about being in the room where decisions are made. But according to insiders, J.D. Vance hasn't just been left out of the room, he's been quietly pushed to the margins. And the signals haven't been subtle. At rallies and interviews, Donald Trump has repeatedly brushed off questions about Vance's future in the Republican Party. When asked whether J.D. could be his heir in 2028, Trump didn't hedge, he just said no. Not even a diplomatic dodge. Just a cold, flat rejection, followed by vague praise for other talented people. For a man like Vance, who flipped his political identity to align with Trump, the public dismissal stung, and the message was loud and clear. Trump's inner circle has also shown signs of shifting alliances. Key staffers have reportedly begun briefing other GOP figures more often than they do the vice president. One source close to the administration said, J.D. gets invited to the meetings, but no one really listens. Whether it's true strategy or just personal disdain, the effect is the same. Vance is present, but he's not powerful. And while Trump enjoys playing kingmaker, he's also notorious for humiliating those who try too hard to please him. During a campaign rally in Ohio, Trump mocked Vance for being desperate for his support. "JD wants my approval so badly," he said, laughing as the crowd followed. That moment was supposed to help Vance. It ended up branding him as Trump's errand boy. The humiliation wasn't just public, it was personal. Vance may hold the title, but behind the scenes, it seems he's viewed as expendable. In Trump's world, loyalty only goes one way. And when someone more useful comes along, you're sidelined without a second thought. But while JD was being squeezed out, another figure was rapidly rising, one with more power, more visibility, and possibly Trump's full confidence. If J.D. Vance was already on shaky ground inside the Trump administration, his stance on foreign policy may have been the final wedge. Specifically, his vocal skepticism about U.S. aid to Ukraine drew fire not just from Democrats, but from conservatives with global clout, most notably, Bill Browder. Browder, a former hedge fund manager turned international human rights advocate, is no stranger to confrontation. After his lawyer was tortured to death in a Russian prison, Browder dedicated his life to exposing Kremlin corruption. So when Vance opposed the Repo Act, a bipartisan bill that would seize frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine's reconstruction, Browder didn't hold back. He accused Vance of echoing Kremlin talking points. "Senator J.D. Vance is now parroting Vladimir's exact words," he said bluntly. That wasn't political disagreement, it was a direct accusation of enabling Russian propaganda. The tension escalated during a heated White House meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What was supposed to be a diplomatic discussion turned into a shouting match. Vance reportedly scolded Zelensky for being ungrateful for U.S. support, claiming he was undermining trust by airing disputes in front of the media. Trump backed him up in public, but insiders say the spectacle embarrassed the administration behind closed doors. Even worse, the meeting ended with a cancelled press conference and social media posts flying in both directions. Zelensky reaffirmed Ukraine's gratitude. Vance, on the other hand, suggested the Ukrainian president wasn't ready for peace and had disrespected the Oval Office. It was a moment that damaged America's diplomatic credibility and further isolated Vance within the White House. While some praised him for standing firm, others saw recklessness that jeopardized global alliances. And as the Ukraine crisis deepened, another name kept popping up in strategy sessions, press briefings, and key appointments, someone stepping into roles that could only be seen as preparation for something bigger. While J.D. Vance seemed to fade into the political background, Marco Rubio was everywhere, literally. In one of the most unconventional moves in recent political history, Rubio began collecting titles like trading cards, Secretary of State, Acting Administrator of USAID, Interim National Security Advisor, and even Acting Archivist of the National Archives. 4 roles, all at once. Some called it overreach. Others saw it for what it was, a calculated power shift. Trump's decision to stack Rubio with responsibility wasn't just about confidence. It was about visibility. At every press conference, every summit, every late-night TV soundbite, there was Marco, defending Trump's policies, framing U.S. diplomacy, and standing as the face of the administration's foreign strategy. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was busy posting about obscure Doge reappointments and sparking viral debates over dog breeds. The contrast was embarrassing and deliberate. Even Vice President Vance couldn't resist poking fun. After Rubio's Vatican visit, Vance tweeted a snarky jab about the papacy being the next logical promotion. The internet ran with it, dubbing Rubio Pope Marco I and Secretary of the Universe. But behind the humor, the tension was palpable. Rubio was rising fast, and doing it with Trump's full approval. What made Rubio's ascent even more notable was how aligned he seemed with Trump's global vision. He echoed Trump's tough talk on China and Iran, praised the controversial Ukraine mineral deal, and steered conversations away from forever wars, while still championing American leverage. The two looked less like president and appointee, and more like co-architects of a post-Trump world order. Inside the White House, it became clear, Rubio wasn't just filling gaps, he was being groomed. Trusted. Elevated. In every way Vance wasn't. And as Rubio gained momentum, one question began circling through Washington like wildfire. Was J.D. Vance ever really the chosen one, or just a placeholder for someone more presidential? For all his titles, controversies, and camera time, J.D. Vance now finds himself in a strange political limbo. He's the Vice President of the United States, but it feels more like a ceremonial role than a seat of real influence. In a White House dominated by personalities like Trump, Musk, and now Rubio, Vance has become what no political figure ever wants to be: forgettable. It's not that he lacks passion. His fiery rhetoric about family, education, and national identity still generates headlines. But passion without power is just noise. And that's where Vance stands today, on the edge of relevance, slowly being pushed off stage by louder, shinier players. Even Trump seems to treat him more like a utility than a partner. Whether it was the J.D. wants my support so bad jab or his repeated refusal to name him a future leader, the message is clear. Vance might have earned a seat at the table, but he'll never be at the head of it. And the final insult? Trump's public infatuation with Rubio. A man with real political capital, deep foreign policy knowledge, and perhaps most importantly, Trump's trust. While J.D. navigates insults and backhanded praise, Rubio gets promotions and primetime interviews. So where does that leave Vance? He still holds office. Still gives speeches. Still sparks reactions online. But in the halls of power, he's become something else entirely: a placeholder. A cog in the machine of Trump's ever-expanding empire. Whether he steps away on his own terms or gets quietly replaced in the next political cycle remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: J.D. Vance didn't just lose control of his political narrative. He may have never had it to begin with.